The trial against Alec Baldwin has begun. The murder of Halyna Hutchins on the set of Rust, and he already secured a big win yesterday in the pre-hearing. But I wanted to bring in this amazing panel to sum up where we are right now and what brought us here. Plus, Alec Baldwin has been caught changing his testimonies. How is this going to affect the case? We got it all for you here. Welcome to Popcorn Planet. I am Andy Signore. We're getting ready to cover the big Alec Baldwin trial the next couple weeks. So happy to have Christopher Melcher and ItsKim both here who will be helping me throughout the week. In fact, Chris, welcome back. You're in New Mexico, yeah?
Yeah, I'm in Santa Fe and here for the trial. I'm doing reporting every day for Court TV. So I'm going to be part of their live shot at 9 a.m. Mountain every day this week. And yeah, great to be here. I was hoping to take in some of the sights, but it's going to be pretty busy this week.
Well, I'm glad we have you, and you're going to be popping in when you can as well. We're excited to have you and get some reports from that courtroom. And yeah, I wanted to thank you for freeing it up because I want to sort of go over what happened yesterday during the pretrial. Today is jury selection, so I don't expect we're going to see much today. In fact, we heard the judge say the openings will not be today. They will start tomorrow. So I thought today was a good summary day of where we stand so far. We will give you updates on jury selection, but I want to start with this big win from yesterday's pre-hearing. It seemed pretty obvious to me that this judge was getting pretty testy at the end, was not happy with a lot of how this case has been going. She was visibly frustrated with both sides at the end of the case. As they were revealing that the state had held on to, what was it, 1,100 emails, Kim, we were finding out, that just weren't given to Alec Baldwin until days or weeks before the trial, which seems insane. There's so much. Both sides won't really reveal which guests are coming, which witnesses they have, and the trial starts today. I guess I want to start there, Chris. This seems like a complete circus. Is this normal? Is this so big of a case that they should have had more time? Do you think they're starting their footing fairly, or should the judge have said, no, you guys clearly aren't ready? What do you think?
Well, the prosecution has been a mess, from the beginning. A lot of changes, a dismissal of the case and refiling it. And we got to remember, this is a small county. They had to get funding just to bring on the case. It's not like New York or, big city that has all this kind of funding available. So they got off to a rough start. And yes, there were problems yesterday with some of these emails. And it's a bit surprising because they've already done a jury trial for Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, the armorer, who resulted in a conviction. So you figure by now all the kinks of the case would be worked out. There were a lot of last minute stuff yesterday, but that's got sorted out. And this judge is running a tight ship. This case is only scheduled for 2 weeks, or actually a little bit less than 2 weeks, which is very fast. And it is because this judge is not messing around.
Yeah, well, speaking of not messing around, I want to get both your thoughts on this too, because this was the big takeaway too. The biggest win, to me, I saw this as a massive win for Alec Baldwin, is that the judge ruled that he basically, his part as producer is now going to have nothing to do with this case, which to me is mind-blowing, shocking, ridiculous. But it's one of many things that we're going to go through that have been shocking and mind-blowing in this case. But Chris, this is a huge win for Alec Baldwin. Now they're only trying him as an actor and not as a producer, which he was, which is a producer has a big part in how the movie is run, the safeties, the crew, choices like that. Do you think this is going to help Alec's case further?
Well, it helps him tremendously because when Alec had that gun and pointed it at these two people, he was in a dual role, one as an actor, but also as a producer. Now, a lot of people get a producer title or credit for a movie and don't do anything. And if that were the case, then I would agree that he didn't really have any responsibility in his role as a producer because it was just a title. However, we have video outtakes from this production showing Alec bossing people around, even with respect to the firearm and saying, hurry up, reload, just go. He's clearly in control, clearly a dominant force on that set. So this wasn't just a title. And, the court felt, though, that it would be confusing to the jury to hear evidence about the producer's responsibility for safety. The guidelines of the industry say that the ultimate safety obligation on the set is with the producer, and the producer then delegates that to the prop master and the armorer when a firearm's involved. So I understand the court saying we don't want to confuse things, we want to get on with this, streamline the case, but I don't believe that the jury is also seeing really what occurred with the limitation that's been imposed.
Yeah, I mean, I think the judge made a huge error. I'm having a real difficulty with the state's position that they want to show that as a producer, he didn't follow guidelines, and therefore, as an actor, Mr. Baldwin did all these things wrong that resulted in the death of Miss Hutchins because, as a producer, he allowed these things to happen. I mean, I don't understand what she's not following there. This happens all the time on set. It just sounds like she's not really experienced in how the way these sets run and how Hollywood is run, how a lot of these actors do have a lot of decision, and they're making creative decisions on the fly to cover their own butt to get things done. And that absolutely one can wear both hats. And as the boss of the movie, it is absolutely relevant that he was not only the actor making these decisions, but that he was making bigger financial decisions to move faster, to cut corners, etc. While he's performing. People can wear multiple hats. So I'm already a little bit shocked, but this wouldn't be the first thing. The other thing, Kim, I want to bring you into this conversation. You've been watching the Hannah trial again. You've been updating us. The biggest shock to me was they destroyed the evidence, correct? Can you walk us through what happened?
From my understanding, I believe the prosecution had an agent do some testing on the gun, and through that process, the gun is no longer with us, which makes it difficult for the defense to then be able to take a look at the gun and make any findings public to the jury. So to me, this complicates everything, because I do think, even regardless of how you feel about Alec Baldwin in this situation, he has the right to defend himself. He should have the right to be able to look at those things. And I feel that that right was kind of taken from him in this situation. I'd be interested to know Christopher's perspective on this, but I think it does make this a bit more complicated, especially when Alec has been saying that he did not pull the trigger.
Yeah, Alec, anyway, Christopher, how the hell does this happen? They were hitting it with a mallet in the testing phase. This just seems ridiculous. How does this happen?
Well, so Alec is insistent he didn't pull the trigger, and I think that that's more to clear his conscience, because honestly, you don't point a gun or take possession of a gun until you verify that it's unloaded. And, so he's drawing this distinction. Well, it was okay for me not to check or have anybody show me that the gun was unloaded because I wasn't going to pull the trigger. And that's a ridiculous statement, again, just to clear his conscience. But that is part of his defense. I didn't pull the trigger. The gun, I cocked it and it spontaneously went off on its own. Guns really don't work that way. It's a machine, and you got to pull the trigger. You got to cock the hammer on this particular gun, then pull the trigger. That's how the bullet comes out. And so the FBI crime technician went to go test this theory, took the actual gun, cocked it, and tried to see, could we get this thing to discharge without depressing the trigger? And sure, that's a fine test to run, but he was a little bit too aggressive with his approach, and he takes his rawhide hammer and hits it in 6 different locations with the hammer, so hard that he actually broke the thing. And I really don't understand it, why he went to that vigorous testing, because Alec didn't say, hey, I was using the gun to go hammer some nail into some piece of wood on the set and it went off. There was never in the scenario that the gun was exposed to these level of forces that it could break, such that the FBI guy needed to test it so stringently. So to me, gentle pushing on the hammer or manipulation of the gun would have been sufficient. Now it's broken. Alec tried to get the whole case dismissed on that ground. The judge went through the legal test, and basically there was no willfulness or bad faith. This was just, carelessness or accidental that it happened. So legally it doesn't get excluded, but certainly Alex can bring up and will bring up the fact that the gun is no longer in the condition that it was when he fired it, and that maybe it could have gone off. Maybe there is reasonable doubt that it just went off when he cocked the trigger. Again, it doesn't matter, because you don't point a gun at somebody and certainly don't cock the trigger without knowing whether it's loaded or not. So to me, it's irrelevant.
Well, it's interesting because I agree. I agree with what you just said at the end, but the FBI was told that this could do major damage. It hadn't yet been tested by the defense. This is such a bumble that I can't be mad if they lose. How do you put the most important evidence through a rigorous testing that could break it before allowing the defense to at least have their time, so they can't make that defense? And now I'll add to that, Christopher, I want to play a couple quick clips here.
Well, the trigger wasn't pulled. I didn't pull the trigger.
So you never pulled the trigger?
No. I would never point a gun at anyone and pull a trigger at them. Never.
Okay, he said this, right? But when we go to the actual interview, right afterwards with the police,
I want to
listen.
tell you your job, and I'm so sick about this, so sickened by this, that a bullet passed through this girl's body. She's in critical condition in a hospital right now, and I fired the gun.
Now, he just said, I fired the gun. He just admitted he fired the gun. On top of that, listen to this one.
I'm handed a gun, and someone declares, they said, this is a cold gun.
Dave Halls?
The first AD. In my years...
The first AD hands him the gun, according to George Stephanopoulos. But when you go back and actually what he told the police...
Was Hannah the one to physically hand you the gun at
Yes.
one point?
Yes, Hannah was the one who handed him the gun. Christopher, this is clearly going to come back to haunt him. His story is changing all over the place. So how does this affect his... And how do you think this affects the case? But also, do you think he's going to want to testify now that he's already got two conflicting stories out there?
So the defense, does not have to testify. He can remain silent, and many criminal defendants are well advised to do that because the prosecution has a burden of proof. He doesn't have to prove anything. So normally what will happen is that they'll see how the case goes, and once the prosecution rests, then the defense gets to put on their evidence, including Alec's testimony if they want to. So I imagine that decision will be made, late in the trial. I got to think that Alec would do well despite these things that you and Kim are cleverly, showing here, that you would make great lawyers, because these are the kind of things that are going to come back to haunt him. And certainly his recollection then, is going to be better than it was now, years later. So there are going to be problems. He'll be cross-examined. However, he's a well-spoken guy. He's an A-list celebrity. So would there be some star effect there? I think also he's going to demonstrate that this has torn him up emotionally. There's no question. I mean, he didn't intend to do this, and it's devastating to him. That's going to come across. So would there be some sympathy from his testimony? So I'm thinking he's going to testify, but we'll never know until we see what happens.
And then last thing I want to bring up, Kim, you brought up the fact that the medical examiner had a very strange sort of testimony, especially through Hannah's trial. It was labeled an accident by the medical examiner, and the medical examiner was bringing in a lot of factors that shouldn't typically be brought into a medical examiner examination, correct? Can you run down what was said so Christopher can react on that as well?
Well, my understanding of it, and I'm not a professional either legally or in medicine, but my understanding is that when an autopsy is performed and a cause of death is labeled, it usually is about the physical evidence that is in front of you. So if someone passes away at the hands of another person, it's generally considered a homicide. So the fact that this was considered accidental, I did see a lot of dialogue about that this is abnormal. And was causing some concern. And I guess I have a lot of questions about, is this normal in New Mexico? Is this normal for this medical examiner that she has made this call beforehand? Because if not, it does look a little suspicious to me that it wouldn't be declared a homicide.
Well, and that Christopher, why is the medical examiner bringing in intent into her medical examination? That's what's also very strange to me. What are your thoughts?
So like Kim's saying, the coroner is responsible for issuing a death certificate, and then there's going to be a cause of death associated with that. Homicide under a legal definition is, the killing of another person. And so was this a criminal act or not? So they're trying to basically categorize this thing. And okay, for purposes of the coroner's report, do we have an intentional, premeditated murder here, or is this just an accidental industrial accident? They're trying to put it in a category, and fine, whatever they're going to put down on a death certificate is just from the coroner's inquiry, which is honestly not that wide searching. And I would be surprised if the coroner were allowed to testify at this trial, because to me, it's for the jury to determine, what happened here. And was this manslaughter, meaning that did he fail to act with due regard or due caution when he was handling this gun? That's for the jury to decide, not for some medical examiner to do. So I'm hoping that testimony of opinion will not come in here at this trial.
She came in, right, Kim? She was a big witness in the Hannah trial, and
Yes,
was
she
talking
was.
about it. That's what was so crazy about this. So I expect she'll be back. I expect that person who destroyed the revolver will be back. There's a lot of guests on there, but we have 8 days for both sides to plead their case. This is going to be a circus, I have no doubt. But before we go, quick reactions. What do you think's going to happen? Kim, what do you think? Will Alec get away with this?
I think so much of it is going to depend on how the prosecution conducts themselves. When we look at some of what has already gone on, it's been a bit of a mess. And ultimately, we're looking at reasonable doubt. And if the prosecution cannot prove this without a reasonable doubt, and I'm already seeing a good amount of doubt going on here, he may get off completely.
Christopher, your last prediction.
So I think it depends on jury selection. If you have jurors on there that grew up using guns, as I did, we know you never take possession of a gun without checking or having somebody check for you that it's unloaded. And I think that's going to be the deciding factor. Other than that, I think he has some really good, strong defenses. And I think it ultimately comes down to who's on that jury.
I think this is Alec Baldwin's case to lose. I think he currently is winning. I think his team is better. His lawyers are insanely better. And as Chris said politely, the better way, they just don't have the resources that Alec clearly has. But it shows. And I think the only person who can tank this case now for Alec is Alec. I think Alec's own hubris on the stand could turn things around against him. I don't see how he can just sit there with his life on the line, given how much he's needed to talk about this. And I think he could go up there and bumble this potentially, or he could potentially act his ass off and pull this off. I think it's going to be fascinating. I think it all depends on his testimony. So we'll see. And I don't think he's going to be able to resist it. Do you agree, Chris? I think he's going to have to go up there, whether his lawyers advise him to or not. Do you think we're going to see Alec on the stand?
Well, yeah, he gave the George Stephanopoulos ABC interview. That was, I'm sure, against the advice of his lawyer. So I do think you're onto something there.
Fingers crossed. Let's hope and see him up there, because I think it's really going to make or break with him. What do you guys think? We'll be covering it with you all week, so make sure you come back tomorrow as we go live. That's right, we'll be live. So hit the button, make sure you get your alerts, smash the like button, join our party. This is going to be a somber party, but we're going to be there trying to make it interesting and informed. So thank you guys. Chris, get back to New Mexico, to the courthouse. He'll be there. Thank you guys so much for being here. Make sure to support It's Kim over on YouTube. There she is at It's Kim, and Christopher Melcher on Twitter at CA_divorce. We will see you guys live this week.